Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining this event, and thank you for those organizing and hosting me tonight or this afternoon. Let's kick in. The Palestinian-led BDS movement, boycott, divestment, and sanction, has a long history. It turned 20 years recently, and it's anchored into a very strong call coming from from Palestine, which is, if you want to stand in solidarity with Palestinians, do not harm or struggle for liberation, basically. And why and how to do not harm in cutting complicity. Because this Israel system of apartheid, illegal occupation, settler colonialism, and now genocide is sustained through the financial, economic, diplomatic, military support coming from many states and government institutions and corporations, and especially in the West. And so that's the main call to start with when we're talking about boycott, divestment, and sanction. It's to stop and end complicity back home. And so I'm starting with this, and I will end with this as well. But mainly, what is BDS? So BDS is a worldwide Palestinian-led anti-racist, non-violent, and intersectional solidarity movement. It's, of course, inspired by the Global Solidarity campaign that helped to end apartheid in South Africa, but also many anti-colonial struggles from India to Ireland, and of course, often unacknowledged decades of Palestinian popular resistance against the British, and then against the Zionist militias and the Israel system of colonial oppression. And this movement has been created following a call in 2005, the call for boycott, divestment, and sanction, that was signed by a very large part of the Palestinian society, basically from political forces to trade unions to grassroots movements, committees, representing the three main components of the Palestinian people, which are the Palestinian living under occupation in the occupied territory of West Bank, including East Jerusalem and Gaza, the Palestinian living in the 48 territory, which is the today Israel, and the large majority of Palestinians that are living in exile and that are demanding the respect of their right to return to their home and properties. And 2 years after the launch of the call in 2005, those signatories, seeing how the call was answered globally, decided to create a committee that would lead the movement from Palestine, and that would kind of being a support to the strategies, initiating statement, kind of guiding the movement through the years. And that's the Palestinian BDS National Committee, the BNC. And so I'm working for this committee that is a large structure. It has a General Assembly that meets regularly. You have General Secretariat, you have international, you have different committees inside. So it's a big machine that is basically leading and deciding what are the priorities for the movement. And so something that is very important to state from the very beginning is that one of the differences with, for example, the boycott movement against apartheid South Africa is that the Palestinian BDS movement is focusing on complicity and not identity. So it's an anti-racist movement that will not target the identity based on race, religion, nationality. It will really focus on institutional complicity. It's also a call for nonviolent disruption. It's the nonviolent part of the Palestinian liberation struggle. It's deeply rooted, as I said, in decades of Palestinian popular nonviolent resistance to settler colonialism. And it became in 2005 this kind of call directed to Palestinians and to the people of the world, I would say. It's a very intersectional movement. The analysis is that the different oppressive system, whatever capitalism, whatever patriarchy, climate destruction, etc. They are all kind of intertwined. And so it's very important to being able to build intersectional alliances, to connect with those different groups and struggles around the world, because somehow Palestine is at the very center of many type of oppression. You can see that Israel is testing its own colonial and oppressive tactics on the Palestinian bodies and society, and then exporting it to the world to oppress migrants, to oppress opposition political parties, to oppress climate activists through different means. And so building intersectional alliances is very key for the movement, not just strategically to be bigger, but also because it makes sense politically speaking to unite, because our enemies are very much united as well. But what does want BDS? So, as I said, it's a call that was launched in 2005, on 9 July 2005. And so you can find it on the BDS movement if you want to read the initial call that is really at the core of the BDS movement. And so the objective is basically to change the power dynamic. It's to use boycotts, divestment, and sanction in order to force government, corporation and institution, whatever cultural, academic, sport institution, to end their complicity, in order to force Israel to respect the inalienable right of, to recognize the Palestinian people inalienable rights to self-determination and fully comply with the international law, basically. And so the three main demands of the BDS movement, that is a consensus reached after a lot of discussion and reflection, is first to end the illegal occupation and the colonization of all Arab lands, and then the dismantling of the apartheid wall. The second one is basically to dismantle the system of apartheid, that means the UN definition of what apartheid is. And the third one, which is the most important and key for Palestinians, it's the respect of the right of Palestinian refugees to return to their home and properties, as it's stipulated in the UN Resolution 194, and to receive reparation. And so as long as these three main demands and rights are not respected, the BDS movement will continue to impose boycott campaign, divestment campaign, and sanction campaigns on Israel, and put pressure on those complicit allies. Coming back to the first sentence, first, do not harm. It's the analysis that to be in solidarity with the Palestinian people, it starts at home. It starts at cutting complicity as the very first step, basically, to support and to be in effective solidarity, not only in performative solidarity, which is important. I mean, showing solidarity through verbs, through wording is important, but how to make it effective in order that it can affect literally this system of oppression against Palestinians. And as we are in Europe, where not everything has begun, but almost, it's kind of a key place where to start this work. Something that has changed these last few years is that BDS is not only a moral obligation on an ethical stand, it became a legal obligation. You had the grounding ICJ ruling, the International Court of Justice, recognizing that there is a plausibility of genocide, continuing its investigation, but we have now so many historians, legal experts, UN experts that are saying this is genocide. I mean, there is so many way to show that the definition and the threshold has been reached. And then it was followed by another ICJ ruling in July 2024 that recognized the entire illegality of the entire occupation of the Palestinian territory. That was also followed by somehow a UN resolution at the General Assembly of the UN that is literally calling for sanction and literally making the demands of the BDS movement a legal obligation. It's not an option. It's a duty. It's a legal obligation to not be complicit in occupation, in apartheid, and in genocide. So how BDS works? It's set in different operational principles. And as I said, this is kind of a 20 years-ish reflection from the Palestinian civil society that is anchored in so many decades of resistance. But it's based on 3 operational principles. The first one is gradualness. So it's basically building power step by step. Let's take an example. You have a university that is having 5 partnership with Israeli universities. All Israeli universities are complicit. All of them, either by being anchored like Ariel University inside of illegal settlements, either by thinking different precept of implementing genocide, apartheid, and illegal occupation, either in hosting on their campuses army program. Every university is complicit. And so you have, let's imagine a Slovenian university that has 5 partnerships with different Israeli universities. Thanks to student activism, academic activism, we managed to get 3 partnerships being cancelled or being suspended. This is an impact. This is a success. Still, we have 2 that needs to be ended. But we build on these 3 incremental wins in order to reach and keep demanding the final 5 complicit, the end of the final 5 complicit partnership. It's mainly the idea that a revolution doesn't happen in one day. It happens step by step. And so we need to acknowledge these steps gradually. The second one is sustainability, how to sustain this victory, how to make sure that it's not just wording, how to make sure that they sustain in time and we can building on them to move forward. And the last one is context sensitivity. It's basically adapting tactics based on a context. A campaign that will focus on a certain corporation will not be the same in Egypt, that it will be in Chile, that it will be in Japan or in Kenya. It will literally have different tactics because the context is more or less repressive, because you have more or less popular support. I mean, it's all a kind of way of analyzing how to run campaigns. And so these 3 operational principles are kind of guiding BDS campaigns. And now coming to what B and D and S means, I think it's just important to really keep in mind that BDS is not just a call. It's literally, I mean, it's a call, but it's a movement that is running through campaign and pressure. And so when we talk about boycotts, we're talking about consumer boycott, but we're also talking about academic boycott, cultural boycott, including sport boycotts. And the strategy of the BDS, the Palestinian BDS movement, is a targeted boycott strategy. It's not something that Palestinians have invented. It's something that was also taken, used by the South African anti-apartheid struggle and the US civil rights movement as well. So it's basically the idea that if you boycott too many corporation, let's say, then you also divide the energy, you divide the level of pressure. And so what the BDS movement advocate for is to decide of a shorter list of priority boycott targets in order to be more effective. It's also coming from the understanding that as a movement, we want to build people power. We want to grow. We don't want to stay just between us, the convinced people. We need to grow the movement. And the reality is that if you have never-ending list of boycott that are the ones that are circulating sometimes on social media, then at the end of the day, you're losing half of the people because they will be so overwhelmed by the endless list of boycotts that most of them will be like, actually, I don't know what to not boycott or boycott anymore. I don't have the capacity to boycott everything. I'm just not doing it. And so that's where the strategy is coming. Like, we want to make boycott possible for people. And then we move to the next one and the next one, incrementalism. That's the idea. If you can boycott everything, if you take your no thanks app or boycott apps and you're able to do it, do it. I mean, I'm doing it. I'm scanning everything. If you have the energy to do it and you can do it, do it. But at minimum, we're asking people to boycott a priority list. And how do we decide which target is a priority and which one is not? We have 4 selection criteria. And so for every target that we have in the BDS movement, we always apply these 4 criteria. The first one is the level of complicity. You need to have a clear link of complicity that is proven, research-based. So, for example, the BDS movement is not calling directly for the boycott of Starbucks. Why? Because you don't have Starbucks in Palestine. So the level of complicity is far. Starbucks is a horrible company. I mean, if you can boycott Starbucks, do it. They are horribly repressive toward their workers, and they're suing their own trade union because of their solidarity with Palestinians and against the genocide. They're investing proudly on their website in military companies in the US. So it's like the horrible bitter coffee ever. But directly not involved on the ground in the oppressive system against Palestinians. The second one is, again, intersectionality. We're going for cross-movement intersectional work. So let's say that, for example, in Britain, you have one of the targets is Barclays, which is this big bank that is having different investment in military companies that are directly involved in the genocide and in the illegal occupation. It's also the target of the climate movement because Barclays is also involved in destruction in Latin America, in expropriation of indigenous people, I think in Colombia. So it's kind of fitting the criteria because that means that we can kind of connect the struggle and be bigger, be more stronger in our pressure. And so in some activities and action, in shareholders meeting, etc., we can join our forces. So that's how basically we check if there are other campaigns already existing or possible to exist to start a boycott campaign. The third one is the brand recognition and the media appeal. We tend to go for corporations that are known because you need to talk to the people. I mean, people need to know if it's like when you call for a boycott of a company, they need to know directly, imagine, I know the logo, I know which brand I need to boycott, that's easy. So we're going for the company that is the most known and that allow us to reach a bigger audience. And the last one, which is somehow the most important for the BDS movement, is the potential for success. It is important for a movement to have successes. It is important to build, not only for people to know that you're reaching step, to know that you're having impact, but also to create the chilling effect toward other companies. And so increasingly, you have some corporations that are just saying, I'm not going in Israel because I know what is coming on me after. And so that's also the importance of potential of success, how to grow a movement based on impact that we're having. And so when we checking a corporation or we are exploring a campaign, we doing research about what are the weaknesses of the corporation. Do we have allies inside? Can we have trade unions work? Can we have shareholders pressure? Do they have a lot of offices that we can have action in front of? Do they care about their reputation or they don't care at all? So it's all this kind of question that we're asking in order to see if in short or medium term, 5 years, we can expect some successes. And so those are the criteria that we're using to basically decide what are the priority lists of the BDS movement. As you can see, it's here consumer targets boycott list. So you have among them different brands that are very known. You have Reebok, that is now the sponsor of the Israeli Association football, the Israeli Football Association, that includes football teams that are based in the illegal settlements. You have Chevron, which is a US energy company that is involved in the extraction of gas in offshore Gaza, and that is also very much involved in destruction in Ecuador and in other countries in Latin America. You have Xbox, that is one of the biggest branding game of Microsoft, that is so much involved in the AI, the artificial intelligence weapons used against Palestinians in Gaza. And so the choice to go for Xbox as the main flag products is or analysis of how to basically impact Microsoft. So that's the priority targets. Then you have pressure targets. why do we call them pressure targets? It's because as far as today, we consider that it's difficult to boycott it at all. Like Microsoft, Google, for now, are too big. They are everywhere. Now there is also this whole movement that is building alternative to it, but for now, calling for a full boycott of Microsoft or Google is complicated. What we call for is a boycott if you can. I mean, if you can boycott Airbnb, if you can boycott Booking.com, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, do it. But what we call for more, it's to pressure directly the corporation through shareholders' activism, through action. We have a lot of workers, tech workers involved inside of this corporation that are pressuring. So that's all a kind of work that we're doing besides a call to boycott when they can. And then you have the organic targets, which are not called to boycott initiated by the Palestinian-led BDS movement, but that are fitting with the 4 criteria and that we're seeing as an opportunities to call and support as an organic boycott. And so you have Coca-Cola, McDonald's, that are already kind of feeling the heat of the major organic popular boycotts happening, especially since the start of the genocide. Besides consumer boycott, you of course have the academic, cultural, and sport boycotts that is very vibrant and that is growing immensely worldwide. And so basically what we're calling for those academic and cultural institutions, it's to do the following. It's to adopt ethical academic ties policies. So basically what it means besides this very complicated jargon, it's to have universities or academic institutions to implement a policy that would kind of help to prohibit partnership with entities complicit in human rights violation, genocide, or apartheid, anywhere it occurs. So it's somehow pushing for more democracy and for more transparency of where the money of the students is going and where the university is basically having partnership. And so that's kind of work that is ongoing toward public universities, but as well private universities that sometimes have even investments. If you think of the US universities having billions of investments in corporation, including corporation involved in the genocide. And then for cultural institution, it's also adopting ethical programming and sponsoring, which basically help to align criteria to decide on partnership, funding source that will help theaters, cinema, festival to screen their partnership and the sponsorship and where they put the money and where they find their partners. And so that's all a work that is ongoing besides cultural boycott and academic boycotts. That was the most known part of the BDS movement, because everyone, when thinking of the BDS movement, will think of boycott movements. But then there is the D, which is divestment, which is also a huge part that, thanks to students in the US mainly, became quite famous and much known. It's targeting every entity from city councils, trade unions, pension funds, churches, that are basically investing, that have financial power. And so what we call them to do is to adopt ethical investments policy. How to adopt a policy that will kind of add a human rights component as a criteria when they decide to screen, when they decide to invest. So when you have a big pension fund, like the Norwegian pension fund, which is the biggest wealth fund in the world, we push for adopting more clear guidelines and more clear criteria to exclude any corporation involved in atrocity crimes, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. And so here you have, for example, like a picture coming from Norway, where the activists are really pressuring the Norwegian fund that has already in the past divested from Israeli banks, for example, from Caterpillar over its role in the genocide. And so that's kind of growing pressure happening as well. You have also churches in the US that have divested as well from different corporations. You have some banks that have decided as well to adopt this kind of ethical investment policies. If you take UK, many city councils have passed this kind of policies, because in UK the pension funds are very much linked to the municipality or the city councils. Sorry, municipalities is not the good word. City councils. And so you have people in their localities that are pushing and pressuring their elected officials in order that they pass a resolution that would enforce the pension fund to exclude, for example, military companies from their list of where the money of the pension of workers is going and is invested. And so the whole work around divestment is done by activists, but it's also done by human rights organizations, and it's based on a lot of research from different databases that are, for example, listed here, that you can find if you're interested to go and screen them on the BDS movement website. And then comes the S in BDS, and it's not by chance that it's called BDS and the S is at the end. It's because you need the analysis that we need to build people power. We need to change the power dynamic. And so if you want to build people power, you do it through boycott campaign, you do it through divestment campaign. You're building the movement in order to force government and countries to act. They're not doing it willingly. I mean, history has shown. And so it's important to really build enough pressure or enough power in order to force them to act. And so a quote that is something that we use a lot, that is from Craig Moriber, who is a former head of the UN Human Rights Office in New York, is saying something, again, that we keep repeating. Boycott, divestment, and sanction against Israeli occupation, colonization, and apartheid is not only a moral imperative and constitutional and human right imperative, but also an international legal obligation. It's not a political choice from government to impose a military embargo. It's an obligation from zero, from the A. They should have implemented military embargo. But in the world that we live, and with the power dynamic that we are living in and experimenting, it needs people power to enact it. And so military embargo, when we're talking about military embargo, which has been a demand coming from Palestine for decades, it's about exports, imports, and transfer or transit of weapons, military equipment, and dual-use items. To or from Israel. Dual-use items, it's all those items that can be used both for military purposes and civilian purposes. Steel, coal, fuel, all of them, when they're going to Slovenia, will be used to build roads, will be used to power the electricity grid of Slovenia. When it's going to Israel, it has a big chance that it's used to fighter jets and bombing Gaza. It's used for the electricity grid of Israel that has no differentiation with the electricity grid of settler using it in occupied territory. So it's basically for military purposes. And so we call for a full embargo on all of those items. And that includes also training, police training. It includes joint research through institutions like academia institution, investment, etc. As another sanction, we call for energy embargo. As I said, oil, gas, coal are very vital, especially now under the genocide for apartheid Israel. And so one of those that were exporting coal were Colombia, for example. And through a presidential decree, Gustavo Petro imposed an energy embargo on Israel. So now the second biggest exporter of coal, strangely enough, is South Africa. So that's how you come to this kind of double and complexity, because South Africa is the biggest coal exporter. There is pressure, but at the same time, it's one of those countries that is bringing Israel to court for the very first time in its history. So it's how also to kind of not throw South Africa in the bin, because, I mean, they are a supporter and we cannot afford losing them. But at the same time, also having a kind of a balance and strategic radical position where we kind of pushing them more and more to end their coal export. knowing as well that it's not just a decision from a government. We are a capitalist system. Corporations are very big, and the giant energy corporation like Drummond or any others are very powerful, and sometimes more powerful than a government. So that's how basically the work is being done. Of course, you have the trade and free trade agreement measure, including at EU level, that has still today, after 2 years and a half in genocide, an EU-Israel association agreement, but also at local level. Some countries have trade agreements with Israel. Some countries still recognize the illegal occupation. Still, for example, some of them are visiting settlements in East Jerusalem. I mean, thinking of the Cyprus minister, thinking of the Albanian minister that were proudly shaking hands with settlers in the settlements. So it's all this kind of sanction happening, and you can see globally some countries have completely cut diplomatic relation with Israel. Some countries have imposed a certain set of sanctions on Israel as well, and that's because of people power. That's because we were in the street, because we were pressuring, doing lobby every day of these last years and decades as well. Another type of sanction that we're pushing for, it's what we call ethical procurement. So you have many cities that are doing this kind of open public procurement when they need to build a tramway line, let's imagine. And then they will open to several companies to apply to this process. And so basically we want to make sure that companies that are on our priority list or companies that are involved in crimes are not able to run this, because that's also a way for us to kind of pressure them. If you want to participate in public procurement and have contract with local authorities, then stop your complicity. And so that's some of the work that is done amazingly in countries like Italy, Ireland, Britain, Belgium, Norway, starting in Sweden, the Netherlands, especially in Europe at the moment, to to implement these ethical procurement policies in order to make sure that any corporation that is involved in atrocity crimes are not able to run it. Another type of sanction that is more an international call is the campaign to unseat Israel. At the time, apartheid for South Africa was suspended from the UN because of committing the crimes of apartheid. Israel is increasingly recognized as an apartheid state by human rights organizations, by experts finally upholding what Palestinians have been saying for decades. And so there is this push inside of the UN to basically suspend and exclude Israel, suspend Israel from the UN. Again, the UN is a system and a space where you have a lot of power dynamic happening at different level, from the UN Security Council with this horrible veto system to the UN General Assembly, where it's one state, one vote, but you still have this kind of power dynamic happening. And so it's how to push for it. And so the state of Malaysia has now started working on a resolution that they want to put for a vote. And so there is a lot of work that is being done to basically lobby other states to support this demand. And in general, it's part of a more general call to suspend Israel from the UN, but also from the Olympics, from the FIFA, from the UEFA, from the Eurovision. Just as is what for apartheid South Africa in the past, it's not new. Russia has been also excluded. So we also demand the end of double standard and this hypocritical stand that mostly the West, but the world in general, is giving to Israel. So it's basically not a green card that we want to give to Israel, it's a red card. And so that's kind of demand for the that are coming from the BDS movement. Now, that's the last part of my presentation, because I spoke already a lot. I think it's always important to remind the impact that we have. The situation on the ground is getting worse and worse. I mean, the genocide in Gaza, the testimonies, the images that we're receiving from the ground, from survivors to the genocide, and then now the increasing ethnic cleansing of Lebanese, In the south, 1.2 million forcibly displaced, the military aggression against the Iranian people, the escalation of the colonization and the settler attack in the rest of the occupied territory. It's like the last law on the death penalty for Palestinian prisoners. It's scary, and it's giving us the feeling that whatever we do, we don't make it. But I think it's really important to take a step back and analyze this situation on a macro level. Israel sounds like it has never been as strong as it is, but at the same time, it has never been as weak as it is today. It has never been as isolated as it is today, internationally speaking. Even economically speaking, you will not see this in very complicit mainstream media, but the economy of Israel is crumbling. I mean, you have so many Israelis that are leaving. You have so many startups that are just falling. You have so many international companies that are not just saying, morally not good to be in Israel, legally not good to be in Israel, but financially not good neither. So they're divesting from Israeli bonds, they're divesting. And so you're seeing at the same time a kind of ideological investment from Zionist wealthy personalities or companies that are then reinvesting, trying to save a ship that is drowning. So that's kind of something that we need to see from also a macro perspective. We're also in a moment where, while the cost for the people, especially in the region, is, I mean, there is no word of the costs that we're seeing, but at the same time, imperial power are also kind of shaking. And we're seeing the whole system is at it's basically at its darkest. But as Palestinians sometimes used to use as a sentence, is that the dawn is just after the darkest hours. And so at some point, it's like how to keep hope and how to keep the work done in order to continue and to make this system falling completely. And so BDS movement is definitely not the one that will do it alone, but it's part of a larger movement of resistance toward oppression worldwide. And it's somehow also bringing Palestine at the center of many types of oppression, as I said initially. I mean, a lot of oppression are kind of centered in Palestine. And so in terms of impact, people power has been able to reach several impact. As I said, Colombia bans coal export to Israel over Gaza genocide. The Spanish government has imposed a partial military embargo, still having loophole that we're still fighting, but at the same time, we reach there not because the social democrat Pedro Sanchez is nice and want to oppose a genocide, because it's people force him to do that. That's the same if you look at the moment. I mean, the Italian dock workers have done incredible work, followed by a lot of dock workers around the Med as well, from Greece to Spain. But like at the moment I speak, we are, for example, tracking different shipment of military-grade steel coming from India to Israel, stopping at Italian ports, and we managed to confiscate, to force the Italian custom in a fascist country, fascist government-run country, to confiscate those shipments and to investigate on them. And so legally, we're going after them. So that's kind of incremental step that you're making those ports not like available anymore. And so they have to change the pattern. And so we're seeing them, like we're seeing those companies kind of being like, we need to change port, and then they're losing millions of euro because they're being stopped, because they cannot dock, because when they're docking, then they cannot load or offload. So that's all kind of impact coming from the people power. You have some companies such as Puma or McDonald's that are ending. For Puma, it's sponsorship with the Israeli Federation of Football. For McDonald's, admitting literally in media that they are losing profits over the boycotts. You have an incredible movement of artists standing against genocide and making the point of deciding we will not allow our profits to be used and to do movies with Israeli production. And among the 7,000 signatories of this pledge, you have very high-level Hollywood celebrities that are making this stand. And then you have, you have for the first time Eurovision. If you take it, it's the first time that 5 countries, including Slovenia, but also Spain, Ireland, the Netherlands, that are basically saying we will not allow, we do not agree with Israel being part of the Eurovision. It should be excluded. It's not, then we're boycotting. And so that's a kind of a message as well to the world. And of course, then you have, and I think that's kind of a nice also recognition of the work of the BDS movement. Then you have Zionists saying like that it's a bit annoying. And so you have, for example, the chairman of the Israel Export Institute saying that BDS have changed Israel global trade landscape, and that economic boycott and BDS organization present a major challenge for Israel. We have a full ministry that has been created to kind of go after the BDS movement. And we're still here because they're not able to find any way to basically crush the movement, because it's a movement. It's based on people. So then you have, for example, the former president of Israel that has said that BDS is a strategic threat of the highest degree, because it's impacting its reputation. It's impacting directly the amount of partnership their universities are able to do. They're directly impacting the capacity of using culture as a way to artwash the crimes. It's impacting the capacity of having economic relation and trade relation with some states. And they will never be able to go back to what it was, the statu quo that was before the genocides. And that's because we continue to push the line, and we continue as people to say there is no business as usual under genocide, occupation, and apartheid. And that will never change. We will not allow that. And that's why the movement and the solidarity movement as a whole is a threat. And so coming to the last point, how to get involved in the BDS movement if you're not yet involved. It's actually quite simple. It's that you start joining a BDS group. You have one in Ljubljana in Slovenia. You have, if you're coming from other countries, you have in almost every country of the world. From Chile to Canada, from the US to South Africa, Senegal, Egypt, Bahrain, Lebanon, Japan, South Korea, New Zealand, India, Norway, Sweden, Denmark. I can not list them all, but you have the movement is growing extensively, and so we have BDS groups and partners everywhere. So whatever, at university, at your workplace, at your trade unions, at your municipality, in your free time, there is always a way to kind of push for ending complicity where you are. That's something that BDS is doing. It's like you don't need to do big things. It can start by you individually, but more importantly, you need to organize in where you are, in your hobby, in your workplace, and with the people around you. So joining a local BDS group is a first step to pressure. Ultimately, BDS movement is about policy change. We need sustainable change, and so it's about building people power and forcing government, institution, and corporation to end their complicity. One of the nice campaign that it's quite easy from where we are to do is the Apartheid Free Zone campaign, which is a campaign that is basically aiming to create spaces that are first and foremost boycotting every priority target of the BDS movement, which means no Israeli fruits and vegetables, no insurance at AXA company, no HP computer. If you have an HP computer, it's fine. You don't need to throw it away. We're not for environmental damage, but just the next one should not be HP. So that's basically what we call those spaces to implement. And when we're saying spaces, saying spaces like this, cultural center, community centers, restaurants, businesses, theater, box club, schools, whatever. And I'm sure from Ljubljana, I'm pretty sure you already have probably dozens that can directly declare themselves apartheid-free zone and joining a movement and a network of thousands of apartheid-free zone from Latin America to, to Japan recently. Hotels are also joining. You have in several African countries as well. So pharmacies are becoming apartheid-free zone in boycotting Teva, which is an Israeli medicines company that is keeping the Palestinian economy captive. And so in South Africa, you have pharmacies free of apartheid. So it's really possible where you do your sports, where you study, where you go do your groceries, to basically go with the campaign and suggest them to register and to become an apartheid-free zone and join the movement. So yeah, I enjoy you to go on the website and then to connect also with BDS groups, that maybe you can also bring it to the BDS group, because somehow it's not about just waiting for campaign to be implemented, but to be also the drive of change and come with suggestion to those groups and those activists. And I will just end this presentation by one sentence that we use a lot, which is Palestine frees us all. I think this last 2.5 years have helped a lot of people to kind of uncover or unmask what the society is, how deeply colonial, racist, hypocritical the society is, and how those different levels of oppression are kind of intertwined and living and breathing from each other, from patriarchy to capitalism to racism, and how they're really like breathing together. And somehow Palestine, through solidarity movement, through standing and actually efficiently cutting complicity, it's not just about Palestine. It's about freeing us, every one of us, all of us. It's about bringing hope as well, because that's what they want us to give up. That's what they want Palestinians to give up. But it has been 78 years and more that Palestinians continue to resist, continue to survive, even surviving a genocide, and kind of teach to the world what it is to be Palestinian and what it is to the willingness to be free. And so somehow that's how Palestine is freeing us all and will free us all, because it will not only dismantle the Israeli system of apartheid, settler colonialism, and illegal occupation and genocide. It will somehow also bring the dismantlement of many different systems of oppression that is oppressing every one of us. So yeah, I hope that was kind of a short introduction to what the BDS movement is, and if you have any question, remarks, I hope this space is safe enough for you to feel comfortable to ask the question. And there is a mic, I see. And yeah, I'm happy to have a conversation, because I know it was a lot of information, but I'm also looking forward to hear from you and learn from you as well. I don't bite.
Hi. First of all, thank you for your time and for being here with us today. I think even if some of us know, it's always very inspiring to hear it again and to feel reintegrated into the movement. As you know, I just wanted to keep the conversation going, so it's a semi-question, semi-reflection out loud. So at first glance, it seems that perhaps the movement's strongest deck of cards is the mobilization of the populace, right? So it's, as you suggested, working as social groups on trying to mobilize businesses and so on to adopt the BDS campaign. And I wanted to ask you, when we look at Israeli economy, we can see that it's highly dependent mostly on exports of cyber stuff, military, a little bit of agriculture and stuff like that. So, so it becomes more apparent that the boycott movement as such is a delegitimization of the Zionist project, and its also disruption of business as usual and so on, but it seems that it might not have the strongest impact on the economy per se. Like, it will definitely, cause a dent or some harm, but it doesn't really, fundamentally kind of put Israel under that kind of strain. And I, following that, I wanted to ask, in terms of where we are today, the BDS movement, is there an attempt at re-strategizing our political work, in a sense of, one of the challenges that the BDS has always faced is that it is a social movement or a political movement, and it's not endorsed, say, by the political parties in Palestine, perhaps. And I'm just wondering if, at this moment, if we want to kind of not shift gears, but try to, I don't know, are we working on lobbying certain leftist groups or leftist political parties? Are we trying to integrate the BDS demands as officially as part of certain political campaigns and so on? Or do we think that, is it best to actually just stay in the lane of disruption and delegitimization and so on? Thank you.
Do we want to have several questions and then I answer, or do you prefer, is there any other question? Or you felt like overwhelmed by the very, very important one? I can start, and if it's coming, then please feel free. It's a very important question, and also, I also acknowledge that I don't have all the capacity to answer to it, because there is also a lot of work that is done in Palestine at the moment. But definitely, the Israeli economy is kind of an interesting one, because it's very dependent from exports. It's like the biggest market is the European market, but then it's also having a lot of legitimization through military and tech corporation partnership. And so that's the one that are really getting a lot of money at the moment, because they're selling a lot of military supplies. And AI is becoming very important, whatever in military or in any other field. So it's definitely an economy that is, even if facing turbulences at the moment, it's still standing throughout decades of pressure, but throughout 2.5-ish years of genocides, where you have multiple, people becoming like the reservists in joining the genocidal army. You have people flying away, and most of them being settlers with double nationality are then leaving and basically being among us. So you have many things that is happening, and then in another economy would have made the country falling. But Israel still stands, because it has a very core, important ideological component that make the people and the economy standing still, and having a lot of also flow of money coming from outside, from Zionist ideological support from outside. So definitely, as such, the economical aspect is like the economical aspect of the BDS movement is an important one, but not the main one. And that's why the question of sanction, the question of academic ties, the question of, ending academic ties, cultural ties is also important, because it also impacts the way the society continue to function and see itself vis-a-vis the rest of the world. So BDS movement now is also just one aspect among many different ways of Palestinian resisting, and how the way the world is also functioning. And so somehow there is multiple way of kind of pressuring this system of apartheid and illegal occupation. But there is ongoing reflection about how to adapt the movement, or how to basically making it evolve. And inside of Palestine, facing the current challenges, political challenges that are happening at the moment, and increasingly, genocidal colonial violence happening and spreading from, to the rest of Palestine, there is reflection about how do we want to evolve, but what are the risks associated with it? Because the three main demands of the BDS movement is a consensus, but it's a very fragmented society. I assume you may be Palestinian. So, I mean, politically very fragmented. And so the risk of opening the box of rediscussing things is that somehow it will also kind of make the risk that somehow you have more fragmentation. And where like the BNC, which is the leading body of the BDS movement, is somehow bringing together so many different organizations, trade unions. There is a representation of the political parties. Not every political party is represented in the BNC, because then they would bring, that was a decision at the time, they would bring their own political fragmentation and agenda. So it was decided to have one representation that should represent all the political forces. So that's different way of now. There is this discussion, there is General Assembly happening, and it's kind of an inside Palestinian discussion. It's not something for the non-Palestinians and the solidarity movement to talk about. And that's where the BDS movement is very clear. It's not, it's one way of supporting and resisting, but there are many other ways. And then inside Palestine, there are ongoing discussion about what to do. And if something needs to happen about changing the BDS call or changing the BDS movement way of functioning, it has to be anyway done and decided collectively on consensus by the member of the BDS National Committee. And so that's where, for example, I truly acknowledge that's not where I am the most knowledgeable, because that's not the part of what I'm doing. And somehow it's also about security. I mean, the best way to secure a movement is also to fragment the information. So, so that's what I can say. But there is definitely reflection on how to strategically adapt some campaigns, some tactics, some alliances as well, in order to have more impact, but also in being, I mean, it's somewhere to say, even me saying it loudly, but change takes time. And when you're challenging a very deep, grounded, oppressive system that has the backup of the US imperial power, it's not something that's changed in one day or even in 2 years, even if we wish it would. But it's kind of systematic, sustainable work that needs to be done in order to end complicity ties by complicity ties, and ultimately hoping that at some point, also in looking for accountability for any of those that are involved in crimes, from media to corporation to institution, that will help to kind of eat bite by bite the system, if I may say.
You mentioned that the Spanish military embargo still has holes in it, and the movement is working on fixing this. Can you talk a bit more about this? Because we're kind of in a similar situation here, and particularly with all the cybersecurity stuff that you mentioned. So.
Yeah, so the campaign for military embargo in the Spanish states is kind of very interesting to analyze, because they've been able to build a very strong, broad alliance of different grassroots groups, from the usual left to a very mainstream, big human rights organization, trade unions, political parties. And they were able to also use different range of tactics, from the usual lobby of member of parliament to building relation with mainstream media, to organizing people in mobilization, joint mobilization from villages to bigger cities. They were able to do some specific direct action at certain port, or at certain blockage of some corporation involved in military ties. They were targeting the armed weapons fair in Barcelona or in Madrid or in Andalusia. So there is different kind of tactics that were used and campaigns that were used that kind of help to have some building power, to the extent of having a law being passed in the parliament, and then a royal decree being ordered by the government. But of course, as I said, like, it's not it's Pedro Sanchez. I mean, it's PSOE, which is what is the Socialist Party, very social democrat party, in a coalition with Sumar, which is a coalition of different left groups. And so it's about understanding the kind of the dynamic of this government and how to basically find a way to pressure and use the good pressure points in this government and in this parliament, to the extent that they were forced, in order to please the public opinion, and they were forced to to declare a military embargo. Now, in the analysis of what this military embargo is, there is loophole. In terms of dual use, there are loopholes, which is the same in Slovenia. There are loopholes in terms of some transit by air, because you have the majority of the transit that is happening by maritime transfer, but you're starting to see land and air transit happening through even passenger flights. You have Air France and Lufthansa that are transferring military material while going to Tel Aviv. So you can see this kind of changing path. And that is not something that is part of the military embargo in Spain, for example. Now, it's like we should not idealize what we're able to reach. It's not something, it's not an easy path, and it will never happen in once. As I said, like a revolution never happened in one step. And so you have to kind of build on what you already have. And so what we're doing now, for example, in Spain, is that we kind of monitoring, we kind of showing where you have the loophole that kind of help complicity to happen still, and then to kind of make the government facing the fact that there are loopholes happening, and so they need to correct them. And so we're bringing them some legal analysis. We're making the job for them sometimes. I mean, we have some operational guidelines that we're bringing. We're talking with the right people in the administration, in the port authorities, etc. So that there are we're becoming expert in somehow in what the loopholes are, and building analysis and building competencies to understand how to basically change them. And then it's continuing mobilizing people and making it important, mobilizing also cultural figures. What they did very well in France, in Spain as well, is that in every film festival, every cultural event, you had massive amount of actors or artists or singers that were having pins, that were talking about Gaza, that were chanting, calling for free Palestine in their speech. So it's kind of building on the mainstream, because that's the kind of event that everyone is looking at the TV. So that's how you build basically a kind of a pressure, to the extent that you're reaching those amount of power that make you able to have this power balance that change, and that you can impose more and more. And when in the case of Slovenia, there are loopholes. I mean, it's a partial military embargo that's in some part is even not implemented. And so it's about also being able to prove that there are still shipments of military material, including dual-use item, passing by copper ports. It's also showing that there is still cyber dual-use item are kind of outside of the scope of the military embargo in Slovenia, and how proving that there is that they have implication directly in the genocide, or also legally speaking, the legal work is important. And that's something we're starting in several countries for over a year, basically going either after states or either about some corporation. Like in Spain at the moment, we have a case against Sidenor, which is a Basque steel company that has sent I don't know how many tons of steel to IMI in Israel, which is a military company, and so we're going after the board, because that's the thing as well. Legally, the board is responsible of the decision they're making. So you're going after the CEO, you're going after a member of the board for the decision. And so Sidenor and the board is at the moment facing court. I mean, not directly court case, but they have been facing strategic litigation at the moment. And so that's things that we're exploring for any strategic part. And so maybe that's something to explore in terms of Slovenia, building research, building information. And when you see that there is a strategic interest of going legally, you go. But that's when we say strategic, it's about thinking. Because, for example, going after the bigger fish is not always the most strategic thing, because then you lose it, but you create a precedent, a negative precedent for the next one. So you can go to the smaller fish that you know is complicit, that you know you can win, and then it's building a positive precedent that you can build on incrementally in order to go after the bigger the fish after, and creating also this kind of chilling effect. So it's a lot about research, which for many activists is not the most sexy things to do, but it's about knowledge. It's about connecting with investigative journalists, with academics that are willing to do the job, and that everyone has its part of work to be done. But I think that's a discussion that we can have also, like privately, internally, of how to discuss how to basically pressure the government, knowing that, if I understand correctly, you don't know really what will be the color of the next one. So depending of which color it will be, it will also change the tactics that you will apply on this government. Yeah.
So thank you very much, Fiona, for your presentation and for being here tonight. It was very nice to hear you. I'm coming from Albania, that you mentioned before, and the civil society and the grassroots who are very much involved in Palestinian cause in Albania, they have declared already the complicity of our Albanian government and prime minister. And even if it's very difficult and fragmentary to get together and to protest on everything in Albania, not only for the Palestine cause, there are different initiatives and fights, from protests to national campaigns to boycotts, cultural boycotts, to legal cases against the rabbin in Albania. And also media who are trying to inform, translate for the general public in Albania. But I wanted to ask you, and I mean, yes, in everything that I mentioned, there are elements of the BDS movement that are somehow reflected in these actions there. And the question was, is there an organized communication between the BDS movement in Southeast Europe or in Balkans, or is there only a fragmented exchange that you have stabilized already? Or it's only one way, following, for example, grassroots that are following the BDS movement, and that's it, and somehow reflecting it, I don't know, in an informal way? And the second one, I would like to ask you also, how do you see the BDS movement related with these groups who are operating in a very, very difficult positions against these authoritarian governments in the Western Balkans, not only in Albania, but also in Serbia, and North Macedonia, and Montenegro, and I mean, a little bit different in Kosovo, but still very much problematic as a government. So I would like to hear a little bit more how BDS movement is somehow connected and exchanging with this. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So yeah, we have BDS partners in Albania, recent one. So the way the movement function, it has three main guidelines. There is the affiliation guidelines that kind of situate clear criteria how to become a BDS groups. There is the anti-racist and against all form of discrimination guidelines that set it like as an anti-racist movement. And then there is the anti-normalization guidelines that are kind of the framework for any relation between Arab, including Palestinians, and Israeli in some events, including international events. And so these three guidelines are kind of the core of the BDS movement. And as long as a group is in agreement, and then of course the respect of all the inalienable rights of Palestinians, and the three main demands of the BDS movement. But as long as those are respected and there is a commitment to, then groups can join the BDS movement and reach out basically to the BNC or PACB to join internally some mailing, internal communication happening. And so there is a kind of, so you have some groups that are maybe not really aware about what the Palestinian BDS National Committee is and are not reaching out. And so they will more having the information coming from social media page on the website and kind of trying to follow. Then you have those that are kind of joining the movement. There is no formal signatories or anything, but we have a list on the BDS movement per country. And so where we have an established relation of like back and forth. And the way the BDS movement function is that we have regional coordinators in every region of the globe, from North America, South America, Africa, Arab world, Europe, and Asia Pacific. And then you have campaign coordinators that are really basically strategizing around the campaign on military embargo, around tech, around energy, maritime transfer, policy work at the UN. So it's kind of divided by topic. And so those groups are kind of connected and joining campaigns, discussion, and strategizing and connecting between each other. And so when it comes to Albania, they are part of a lot of cultural boycott work. They are also involved in somehow in maritime transfer, even though the reality being that with private ports and the level of corruption and repression, there is not much that can be done. But also how to use the strength of the movement from outside, because for this repressive regime that are Austria, Hungary, Czech Republic, it's also important to kind of build pressure outside and kind of attack the reputation, because those countries, weirdly enough, are still kind of not feeling comfortable when they are attacked by mainstream British media, or when they are like under the scope of or when you bring them to court. Some of them, like France, has been taken to court, the European Court of Justice, over its repression of the right to boycott. So, and we won. So there is this kind of way of working with those contexts, and also how to exchange and having space for those different but similar contexts to kind of discuss what tactics to use. It's definitely, as I said in the presentation, one of the operational principle is context sensitivity. And so you will not act the same in Austria and in Egypt than you will act in Slovenia, in Belgium, or in Colombia. So we adapt a bit the work to be done. We're a bit more low profile. You don't need to stamp BDS everywhere. We don't care. What we want is to do BDS. So if it's about doing ethical procurement, if it's about doing awareness, depending on the context, it's about research and being able to share information that we can use from the outside. That's all of those kind of action that can be done as well. And then building alternative media, trying to build alternative institution for cultural institution. That's the kind of work that can be done. But then it's also about discussion, and my part of my role and my job is movement building. So it's about being able to have those discussions with groups and try to find ways to be supportive, to have the solidarity of the movement, but also being able to see what makes the most sense in your context. Because there are tactics that cannot be used and can be harmful, not just for people and for the group, but also for the whole movement. There are responsibilities. If you're joining the BDS movement, and there are guidelines, and they are not just there because we want to have guidelines, they are also there to keep us safe, because the amount of attack that we receive, the amount of repression that we receive is already big enough to not like just do stupid things that will create even more repression. So yeah. But happy to be connected, to connect you with groups. I'm sure you, if I understand, you know them. Okay, sounds like, I mean, happy to stay for a drink or discussion more one-on-one after, if you want. Do you want to?